Renee Cohen. I see we are recording today, so I just want to call that out that we are recording today's session. We're going to be answering some chat questions as they come through. So I'm Renee Cohen. I am the Marketing Operating Executive for Portfolio Services here at Norwest, and I've been here for about 5 months. And I'm not the first marketing operating executive at Norwest. Actually, Lisa Ames, who many of you also know, holds that title. And she kind of laid the groundwork for really building a fantastic function for advising our portfolio companies around go-to-market strategy. And she took on an exciting new role about a year ago as CMO for Norwest as the firm. She is kind of doing double duty with that job of CMO and operating executive. She added to the band a little bit, and I have joined as well. And the role here as operating executive is to work shoulder to shoulder with our portfolio. I've worked with several of you on today's call, and prior to joining Norwest, I do have experience as a marketing executive and leader in enterprise B2B startups, as well as experience leading strategy and consulting in a marketing agency. So I kind of bring that experience to help guide you with any question that you have. If I don't know the answer, I will certainly work to get the answer, and we'll work on it together. And we have other advisors in our ecosystem, and I'm really excited to introduce Ranjeet Vidwans, who works also closely with a number of companies in the Norwest portfolio. So Ranjeet, why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Renee. Delighted to be on with all of you today. Thank you for your time. As Renee mentioned, I've also been working with a handful of Norwest companies, supplementing the existing portfolio services team. And my day job is I serve as a fractional CMO to a number of early stage startups. My specialty is certainly B2B tech, but much more focused on cybersecurity. So things like identity management, data security, all things cyber. So excited to be here and unpack our conversation with you all a little bit.
Great. Thank you for joining us. This was always fun working with you, Ranjeet. And a little bit of context for those on the call today. This webinar topic came about from something else we worked on closely together, which some of you on the call may have seen, the company launch toolkit that we released a couple months ago. And we started preparing that launch toolkit because we were hearing from a number of seed and Series A companies entering the portfolio questions about preparing for your launch. And so a lot of the time that conversation starts with PR best practices and how to get the most coverage and best reach of that coverage. But quickly it turns into a bigger conversation around all of the other dependencies that you should be thinking about to make that launch successful. So for example, like your website readiness, what's the right timing? How much should you be budgeting for your launch? So we did pull together several advisors with experience in a number of disciplines to put together a really robust set of resources about getting ready to launch your company. But we quickly found that we were talking about more than just that launch event itself. And we were creating a lot more content that could be used for any early stage conversation about preparing to go to market and building your marketing function. So today's webinar is an extension of that content, and we'll be sure to send out some of those other resources I'm referencing after today's call as well. And the reason why we thought of today's webinar was one of this concept that driving growth and interest in your company and your organization, it doesn't stop at launch, it starts at launch. And so while there's all of this activity that leads up to your launch as an event, there's a whole lot more that comes after that you should be thinking about as well. And it can feel overwhelming, but we're going to unpack some of that for you and give you some tips of where to focus your energy. So one of the things that we talked about in our launch readiness roundtable a couple months ago was that launch is almost like a big event, like a wedding. You put all this experience into coordinating it. There's so much anticipation leading up to it and that event, and it can almost feel like anticlimactic after that one day, because there might be a flurry of interest and inquiries in the days or maybe a week or two after your launch. But if you didn't have an integrated plan about how to carry that momentum through, it could look something like this in terms of that spike in interest and that spike in inquiries. And so you might be asking yourself, a few months later, well, now what? And what are we going to do to hit our growth targets? What's going to be next for us? How do we really prepare to grow? And so preparing for your post-launch is as important as preparing for the launch itself, especially if the goal of your launch was a GA announcement for your product and the objective to start driving adoption and growth, and you're starting to set firm revenue targets. And the good news is a number of you on this call are also post-launch. And so there are these things that we're going to call out today. You can start now, and you can start to kind of reverse that curve if you're maybe finding yourself a little bit, wondering where that momentum is. We can help you start building the foundations to get your demand gen programs off the ground successfully and to start thinking about resourcing. And that's what we're going to cover today. And so it starts with building your marketing machine. And these are the three aspects that we're going to deep dive into: messaging and demand generation. We're going to actually talk about this almost in the context of building that foundational go-to-market strategy. And we're going to explain why we're coupling demand gen with that go-to-market strategy here in a minute. And then we're going to talk about how to extend that message into content and brand awareness and pretty low cost efforts. Some of those things might cost a little bit, but not necessarily ramping up your full ad spend yet. You can start building some of that momentum and that reach and that credibility. And then we'll talk about resourcing your team and budgeting. And we'll share some example numbers for how to think about budgeting for your marketing function and how to think about growing your team as well. So starting off, we're going to dive into messaging and demand gen. And I think all of us on this call, we know that demand gen is in service to this last bullet. So it's about driving more revenue, right? And ultimately, that's the success metric for your business and for the demand gen function overall. But sometimes we're so eager to see the results and the outcomes that some prerequisites are missed along the way. And so demand gen that's pointed in the wrong direction can really be a drain on your resources. And so you need to know who to reach, how to clearly articulate why they should care about you. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into three things that you need for demand gen to be successful. And the kind of takeaway that I want you to think about as we go into this section is, if you hire a head of demand generation and these three things have not been done, and we're going to reveal the three things in a minute, or if they've only been done kind of halfway or maybe a little bit shallow and you could go deeper, that head of demand generation that you hire, they're not going to be able to hit the ground running, and they're going to be spending time working with you to build some of these foundations first. So Ranjit, why don't you talk us through this demand gen virtuous cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. Great setup. Thank you so much, Renee. And so it's exactly as Renee said, demand gen ultimately is probably the canonical metric by which marketers get measured, and that's as it should be. But in order to make sure that you're doing it in a high leverage way, that you're getting the most bang for your buck, there's a handful of precursors that you have to make sure you've got put in place. And the reality is, if you don't, you bring on someone to look after your demand gen too early, they're probably going to spend a lot of time doing these three things that I'm about to go through with you. And they may or may not be the right expert for that. Demand gen is its own discipline for all the right reasons. So as you can see here, we like to think of demand gen as part of a virtuous cycle that starts at the 12 o'clock position on our little wheel here with the ICP, or the ideal customer profile. So we need to know who we're targeting. And not just that, we need to know the personas, moving ahead on the cycle a little bit, in those companies that we're targeting. And most importantly, now that we know the companies and the personas, what is the pain that we're solving for them? Why are we adding value to their world? What does their world look like without us? And how can we improve it? And those are crucial things that go into your demand gen execution, after which you analyze, did we target the right companies? Did the message land? Was the nuance right? Was the channel right? All those sorts of things. And so with that, if we dive into the first step a little bit on the next slide, most of us are familiar, at least in concept, I'm sure, with the ideal customer profile. So we want to make sure that we've got the geo locked in, and the industry and the size and things of that nature. But what we really want to do is go a little bit deeper than just those basics, right? So if we're selling, like my background is security, so there's lots of important security questions that that would make a big difference What identity management tool are you using? What's your enterprise identity directory? Things like that. But no matter what your market is, there's going to be things besides the obvious firmographics that you're going to want to know. If you're selling educational solutions, you're going to want to know how big is the HR department? Is there a focused learning department? If you're selling something that's a developer-centric tool, you're going to want to know what other tools and services are they using? What are they like? So go a little bit deeper than just, oh yeah, I want to sell to financial services companies in North America. I mean, of course, that's a common enterprise target, but go a little bit deeper to get yourself some better focusing. And once we've got the ICP defined, obviously we want to know which persona we want to talk to. So there's lots of really good persona examples. This one is a mishmash of different ones that we've used, starting, I think, with an excellent template from HubSpot. But what you really want to do is understand how your buyers and influencers are wired. So you may have 2 or 3 personas that are relevant. You may have the economic buyer, you may have end users, you may have influencers, but for each of those folks, you really want to understand how they're wired. So again, like we talked about in the context of the ICP, we of course want to know what's their role, what's their title, what department do they sit in, but we want to go a little bit deeper. So the first kind of layer above and beyond, some of these obvious things, if we click through one more, please, Renee, is let's have a little more empathy for what these folks are doing. So it's not just what their title is and how much budget they have and what's their team size, but how do they like to consume content? Do they like video? Do they like long form content? What conferences do they attend? What are their own career objectives? How do they use how do they use social media? One common thing we hear is that LinkedIn is great for professional stuff, but Facebook really is how they interact with friends and family. What is their demeanor? How do they communicate in a business context? So depending on what you're marketing, what your offering is, and who you're targeting, this will have a big impact on your brand voice. It'll say, hey, are we cheeky? Are we a little bit irreverent? Are we very crisp? Are we all business? So develop with empathy. And the next thing is to be very, very honest with ourselves about what we can and cannot do for the people that we want to influence. So almost everyone that we sell to or that has a say in whether or not our product or offering gets chosen, the thing that we offer will be one piece of what their day-to-day job is. So we need to have clarity on, hey, this person's responsible for a handful of things, and we help absolutely with a couple of them. We help a little bit with a third one, and there's several things that this person cares about that we just don't do anything about. And it's important to know that because you now get a better sense for how much of their mind share can we really capture. There's things that we can't help them with, and that can give us better insight into speaking to that persona.
And I think it also gets you really crisp too on what do you do, where do you play? Because one of the other things I see is kind of going too broad of trying to be all things to this persona and everything that they do every day. And then it's hard for them to really imagine and picture where do you slot into their workflows and into their business objectives.
100%, Renee, and the reason this is all important, so the ICP and the persona, is because it actually feeds into how we message to them, and I think Renee, you're picking it up here.
Yeah, and so this is a basic rubric for your messaging platform. There are other aspects that go into this, like your unique differentiators. I'm sure you're all fairly familiar with this, but kind of what I see, and I've seen this when I've been in-house roles as working with the executive team kind of internally. I've seen it in my consulting roles and kind of as I'm advising companies in the portfolio. We spend a lot of time in this center here because the product is what we're building day to day. It's what you're spending a lot of time on. You see the technical challenges, you're focused on the operations of your company. And even though you may, academically or even just kind of in your, couple of years of strategy that you've been building your company, you may know the pain and the outcomes kind of in your head, it's not always really well articulated and written down for others in the organization to follow. And I look at the pain and outcomes here as kind of the sandwich to really, the sandwich bread, the bread on either side, to make, to bring structure and to bring meaning to why are you building what you're building? Why does it matter? And as you can see kind of on the previous slides, if you haven't done the exercise of going deeper into your ICP, doing it beyond industry is always kind of like the default for ICP, but going beyond that really helps you hone in on who your serviceable market is truly going to be and where you differentiate the best. And then if you go deeper on the empathy and the honesty with your personas, you can really better articulate the pain and those positive outcomes, that city on a hill solution that you're going to help guide them to. And getting it out of your head as you've been kind of having all of these conversations, you've been pitching your company in sales conversations with investors as well for a long time now, but sometimes you need to just kind of take the time to sit down with your marketing leader and put pen to paper to describe 3 to 5 pain points per persona and map this out. And so that would be not just for your buyer, but also who's using your product, as Ranjit had said, are there other influencers in play here as well, and start to get all of that documented. If that's not really written down or structured, this is where your demand gen, head of demand gen is going to spend their time. And as Ranjit said, not every demand gen leader, depending on their level, has all of the background to be able to help guide you through this process. And so we can certainly, take a look at that with you if this feels like an area where you could create more structure and clarity for your business going forward. And so we're going to move on to the content and brand awareness section here. And going forward, what we wanted to call out here were some low cost ways before you start investing hard dollars in your demand gen strategy, ways to start building awareness and also credibility. Because when you do start putting some dollars behind your demand gen, you do want there to be kind of a robust body of work. You want to look bigger than you are at this time. And so this is helping you hone in on your message and your brand story. Any PR expert will tell you it's really hard to go and pitch if you don't have that really tightly done, like on those previous slides. And then you can start creating a strategy for content placements and how you're going to kind of build a little bit of a body of work on your website, start building out your social channels. That's going to create the credibility and the trust as you do start to accelerate your demand gen motion. And so, Ranjit, you had a warning here. I'll let you take it over from here.
Absolutely. So the challenge with building out awareness is there's a lot you can do. And there's a lot, we always say, don't get too consumed by what your competitors are doing, for example, but you see a competitor do something, you're like, oh, that look, whether it's getting placed in an analyst report or getting marquee billing at some event or something, there's always things that'll distract us from the overall mission of effectively raising our awareness in the market. And so, what we want to do is break down what are some of the key pillars of awareness and where should we focus depending on our stage. So if we go up one more slide, please, Renee. So really, there's a number of levers we can pull on, and most of these should be familiar to all of you. The one we control the most is our own SEO exercise and strategy, what we do on our website with our message and our blog. We can reach out to industry analysts. We can have a press program, right? A PR program, whether it's a contractor or an agency that we hire. There's big industry events. Each industry has 2 or 3 kind of tentpole events where, everyone knows in retail, you go to the annual big show at the Javits Center in New York. If you're in security, it's the RSA conference, et cetera. And then there's your own content strategy. So there's all these things, and they can all take up an inordinate amount of time and budget. So where shall we focus, or where does it behoove us to focus as seed and Series A companies? So at the seed stage, we really want to focus on the left side, right? As we go further right, things start to get heavier and heavier. So at the seed stage, if we click one more, please, Renee, we really want to absolutely make sure we're blogging. That's what we control. In the early days, this can be, founder-led stuff where we know who our lead customers are, what they care about, going back to our exercise and persona development and all that. So let's write about their problems and their pain points and our point of view and how we help them solve them. And we should touch on all the other stuff, right? That's not to say that we ignore everything else. Our focus should be on what we can have the most impact and control over. But analysts, Forrester and Gartner in particular, will let non-client vendors, which is where we should be, especially at the seed stage, brief them once or maybe twice a year because they want to stay up to date on the latest stuff. So make sure you're availing yourself of that opportunity. If there's really important stuff, typically at this stage it could be funding, then we absolutely want to put that out there, maybe run a project, not so much a program, on getting that news out there. If we've launched and have a generally available product, that's something that could be newsworthy. And from a content standpoint, we can take some of the blogs that we've written or some of the content that we've developed one-off for customers and turn that into convertible content on our website. So an ebook, a how-to guide, things of that nature. But really the focus should be on driving that SEO and driving that inbound interest on our website. Now, as we progress from seed to Series A, we want to start amping the frequency with which we do our own blogging, and typically we'll supplement this with maybe some outsourcing, maybe some help, maybe product can help, lean in on some of the more technical blogs. And as we go to Series A, we should really before we get to Series A, if we do nothing else, this is what we should be focused on, and not just because it raises awareness, which is certainly critical, but it's a really, really useful hack in testing our messaging. So we can actually see, hey, when I did this, and especially if I promoted it on, say, LinkedIn and Twitter, were there topics that resonated more? Were there things that got shared more? Am I seeing that there's a particular phrase that's driving traffic to a particular blog or to my website? So it allows us to fine tune the actual pain points that the people that we care about, our influencers and our buyers, what they're dialing into. So for sure, if we do nothing else, we should focus on this. And then as we get a little bit more mature to Series A, we basically start leaning into what we were already doing, which was SEO and blogging a lot more, with a lot more rigor. We should have an editorial calendar where we're publishing stuff on a weekly basis. We should actually have a little bit of a roadmap where we know that, hey, in Q2, this thing is happening. So we're going to write 2 pieces that are relevant to it before that ecosystem release hits or that event happens or whatever it may be. But we also want to start leaning into some of this other stuff. So on the analyst side, depending on where we are in terms of our own revenue and what we're doing, it may be time to consider a subscription. These are not cheap. They can run 50 to 100K a year for Gartner and Forrester. And it's not just the hard dollar cost. If you want to get good ROI on that, then we've got to make sure that we budget our own bandwidth to work those analysts then. So it's not quite a full-time job, but it is, ballpark a quarter of someone's time, making sure that we're touching all these analysts at a regular cadence, that we're staying up to date on what they're publishing and tweeting, that we understand what they care about. As we do stuff on the product or on customer traction or partner traction side, that we're feeding that info back. So it becomes a significant work effort. So that's something to bear in mind. And Gartner in particular does this thing called Cool Vendor, which most of you may be familiar with. So this is a good time to consider either late seed stage or Series A, to say, hey, this is a good time to say, here's why we're interesting, we're new, we're novel, and we're valuable. And then if we build out the rest, please, Renee. Yeah, thank you. We can now start looking at a proper PR program, not just a project for certain key announcements. PR agencies, whether it's a boutique or an agency, can also help us with editorial placements. So things like the Forbes Council and other places where our founders and thought leaders can write thought pieces that drive attention to what we do and the problems we solve. Now is the time to start thinking about marquee sponsorships for some of the bigger events, because again, these are not just hard dollar expense, but they require a lot of effort from a planning, staffing, and execution standpoint. And we can get much richer in the type of content we look at. So getting a regular webinar cadence going, maybe investing in an animated explainer video, things of that nature. So there's a lot of things that we can do from an awareness standpoint. And if we kind of think about this progressing generally left to right, the earlier stage we are, the more our focus should be on the left. And as we mature, we start to keep that focus on the left, but start expanding our horizons more towards the right.
Mm-hmm. And then moving on, especially looking at that last slide, I start to think that's a lot of stuff and it's a lot of activity. So how are we going to put some intentional resourcing behind that activity? And this is a very frequently asked question, especially this time of year across all stage companies as they're going through into most companies are entering their next fiscal year and planning ahead. There's a lot of question around kind of economic outcomes and how that's going to, how is the economy going to kind of impact our forecasting, and then subsequently, how do we think about resourcing responsibly and maybe cautiously going into the new year. And as you kind of look at though, you can build that foundation as we kind of go through the progression of what we've talked about so far today. You can build that foundation, but if you're not going to activate that, so that foundation around your messaging, your positioning, who are you talking to, if you're not going to go activate that out in market, that's not, you're going to have limited success, I would say, in continuing to see that momentum and that growth. And so this is the time to start thinking about, as Ranjit had just kind of stepped through, what is that crawl, walk, run approach depending on where you're at. And so we're going to kick off this section here. I'm going to have Ranjit kind of walk through maybe some principles to help us figure out where are we at right now, because not every seed stage company looks the same, not every Series A company looks the same. And so giving you some principles to think about resourcing and budgeting, but know that it's not a hard and fast rule here, and we can kind of help you through some of the gray area of thinking about this. So. But there was a lot going on here. So we talked about who's going to do all this work, who's going to do all this activity. And when we talk about kind of wayfinding here, Ranjit, why don't you kind of talk through the principle of size and stage and readiness for resourcing?
Yeehaw. Yes, let's find the right cowboy for our size and stage. As we all know, companies are different, right? So we're going to go through, if we go through the first build, please, Renee, thank you so much. Bear in mind that each company is going to be a little bit different. So these are good exemplars, but you might be a little bit ahead in some, a little bit behind in others, but this should help each of you kind of locate yourselves like, right, I'm, even though I'm Series A, let's say I've gotten my Series A, I'm still in many ways like a seed, or it could be the other way around. But generally at a seed stage, you've got your, you've either have no customers or you've gotten a handful of your early adopters. Marquee logos may well be customers you've worked with in past lives that are design partners in helping you build early stages of your product or offering. And in terms of your front office team, it's a lot of founder-led selling. It may be exclusively founder-led selling. And then on the marketing side, what you really want is typically a fractional CMO. So someone that's got seniority and expertise, but that isn't taking out a big chunk of your cap table and your budget the way an experienced VP of marketing or CMO as a full-time hire would lead to. And then typically that person will help you pick the right combination of individual contractors or small consulting agencies to help with, depending on what you want to do, whether it's inbound, whether it's a small PR project, whether it's copywriting. A fractional CMO can help you tailor what you need with the budget you have and what your priorities ought to be. And that actually is a good segue into budget. At this stage, it's really as needed. There's not a defined like, oh, we've gotten this much in our seed and this much of it is earmarked for marketing. Most firms at this stage don't have it. And even if they did, it would just be throwing darts in the dark, because we don't really know. We don't know what our sales cycle is going to look like. We don't know what our average selling price is going to look like. We don't know if we're really going to be able to execute a land and expand strategy or whatever our go-to-market may be. So it's really going to be, hey, this looks like the important thing to do right now. Is it worth do we think it's going to be worth what we're going to have to spend for it, and make individual decisions? Again, a good place where a fractional CMO can help. And as we then progress from seed to Series A, we've now gotten more than a handful of customers. I don't know if this is still a popular phrase. 15, 20 years ago when I first started taking leadership roles in startups, we used to call them the dirty dozen. Like those first 12, 13 customers are so hard to get. So now you've gotten through your dirty dozen. You're starting to build on some repeatability and scale. So now at this point, you should have both sales and marketing leaders. They may or may not be, depending on your company, your target market, your size, and your traction. They may not be Cs. They may not be a CRO or a CMO. They may be VPs. They may even be directors that are punching above their weight class. But they are, that they are people that you turn to as the founder and CEO, saying, yes, this is my sales leader. This is my marketing leader. These should be now FTEs that are in your org. And then they'll have teams under them. And this will be a combination of FTEs and consultants, depending on what you're selling. You may have sales engineers. You may have some stuff in-house and some stuff outsourced. And at this point, you should have your arms around a budget. It'll be loosely defined. It won't be rigid like, hey, this is our events, this is our programs, this is our headcount and ramp plan. But you'll have a sense that, hey, I'm going to spend ballpark this much in the coming fiscal year or the coming calendar year in marketing. And then as we mature out to Series B, there's a lot more structure, right? We've got repeatability, and now we're really going after scale. At this point, there's certainly VP level leaders, if not C-level leaders for sales and marketing. You may still have agencies, but now you're using agencies for expertise and scale, not just as staff aug, which is kind of what we're doing at the earlier stages. And at this point, we've got a pretty well-defined marketing budget. So depending on the maturity, you'll either still be doing marketing as a function of what we want to build in pipeline or revenue, or it could now at later stages even become a function of what we did in the trailing 12. But either way, there's a well-defined budget with stuff carved out for programs, and even within programs, how much is event, how much is digital, how much is brand and comms, what's my headcount and hiring plan. So, like I said, these aren't perfect, but they should help you figure out kind of where you are. Sorry, you're fine, Renee. Thank you so much. And so,
sorry, I had a sticky finger. Go ahead.
All good. And so the reason someone like a fractional CMO can be useful is it's basically getting that experienced and senior help, but in a pay-as-you-go, buy as much as you need kind of capacity. So a lot of the things that we talked about at the top of the call, really understanding that virtuous cycle of demand generation, building out that ICP personas, your messaging platform. These are typically things that the CMO should be, a fractional CMO should be very experienced at, and can help you both in terms of doing the work themselves, moderating conversations with you, your team, and your customers to tease out stuff that may not be immediately obvious to you, and then helping you put together a budget and a plan in terms of, hey, we need a contractor for this. We need an agency for this. This can probably wait till later. We absolutely should not be doing this yet, those sorts of things. And they can also help you pull together your first programs, whether it's your launch, whether it's setting up your first editorial calendar to start figuring out what we want to blog about, bringing on those first contract hires, helping you with those early analyst pitches, things of that nature. But this is really where this should be the focus, especially at the seed stage, to really help you start building out those marketing muscles and teach you a little bit about how the function works so that you can build it out with FTEs as the company progresses.
Mm-hmm. And this could be anywhere from maybe a 3-month engagement where, hey, you're going to focus really on building those foundations first, and maybe building out a hiring plan for your first head of marketing, who may be, more that director level executor. Or it might be someone that, hey, depending on where you're at with your build and your go-to-market, maybe you've engaged somebody for a longer period for 12 months or so, depending on where you're at, and depending on how much you're ready to start committing and resourcing for your marketing programs. And this is, I hope for everyone on the call, going to be a really useful slide. It's a question we get a lot right now as we prepare for the next fiscal year, is how much should I be budgeting for marketing? And that everybody is looking for kind of an answer on that. We do gather benchmark data from companies within our portfolio. We work to triangulate this with other data sets that we find in other studies and best practices. And what I'm going to share with you is kind of a way to think about guiding your budgeting. It's not meant to be necessarily prescriptive, but these are what we tend to see in terms of resourcing for companies of your size and stage. So under $1 million in revenue, as we kind of saw in that previous slide, that seed stage, it's really going to be as needed. And that could go, you know, $1 million is just kind of one number. It could go up to 2 million, right? Depending on where you're at. So really spend only as needed. Think about what you need to prepare for your launch, for example, and what activities that you're going to put in place to keep that momentum going and what you might need to resource for that. But it's not going to be a fixed dollar that you're locking into your budget necessarily at this point. Once you start firming up ARR targets and getting you know, beyond that 1 million, 2 million stage, we tend to see about 3 to 5 times your new ARR target is your sweet spot for your ratio for marketing budget. And I'm going to show you real numbers in a second here to contextualize this. And this budget includes headcount as well as programs. And so what we find is about 40 to 50% of that budget goes toward headcount. Lately, that's been skewing more towards the 40%. And what we're finding is a lot of that, even though it's kind of skewing down, that still is going towards like staff augmentation. And so maybe outsourcing a function you may have insourced and hired for in the past, for example. So spending a little bit more time with contractors before you're ready to bring on an FTE. And so here's how this breaks out in actual numbers. So if your upcoming fiscal year new ARR target is on this lower end, if you're just kind of starting out, getting your every win is you're under that dirty dozen, as you said, Ranjit, and every win is kind of a very active founder-led engagement, then you're probably not going to be putting a fixed marketing budget together. You're going to be working with either a fractional CMO or other contracted resources, other advisors in your network to help you think through what your plan should be for the year and how to support your targets and your goals. And then once we start getting to some real numbers here where you're starting to look at the next fiscal year and say, all right, we've got a $4 million target for this upcoming fiscal, that's when we start to see that marketing budget start to take shape and firm up. And so the team size here tends to be about like 1 to 3 at that stage. And so that would, you know, be, as I mentioned, take up about 40 to 50% of your budget. And this is a range intended to kind of help just give you a little bit of that sanity check. Are you in the right range here? And then we can work together or work with one of your advisors to think about how to go and spend that money. What programs should you be investing in? How much should go to PR versus events versus maybe some digital advertising or testing some demand gen programs. And so we just put this note on here to acknowledge that this is for guidance and we can work with you to help you evaluate what's right for your business now. Know that every cash situation is different as well. And so even though you may have an aggressive revenue target going into the next year, you may, you know, have some cash concerns as well that you need to keep in mind, and you might not want to unlock all of this budget right away. So how do you unlock a little bit and test some tactics that ladder up to your strategy, see what's working, and then have the confidence to move forward. So that's something that I recommend a lot of the time, is not looking at this as kind of one budget for the whole year per se, but thinking about how you want to break that up quarter to quarter and what milestones that you want to hit along the way to inform your decision of, are you going to continue on this run rate, or are you going to dial it back depending on where you're at. And then one of the other, I noticed that there were some questions, actually a lot of questions along the same theme for those of you who are registering for the webinar around what's a good return on ad spend for B2B SaaS? How do we think about ROI in our digital marketing programs? And how do we just gain the confidence in spending? And the answers to those, I always like have to throw this caveat that it depends, but we can sit down and talk about your specific go-to-market motion, your specific sales cycle, and map what works for you. So for example, on the return on ad spend, that answer is going to be different for a self-service product versus a longer enterprise sale that's a really sales-led motion. So for a self-serve product, I would say that return on ad spend of a ratio of like 2-to-1 to 3-to-1 is where you want to be. If it's a longer enterprise sale with a heavy sales-led motion, that's going to be more of a blended return on investment, because it's not going to be one touch that's going to lead to that sale. It's not a direct response type of digital program. You're pulling people through the funnel, and so you need to kind of look at your marketing programs as a blended approach to ROI and a blended strategy to your program's portfolio. And so, especially as you're starting out in seed and Series A and you're just getting your programs off the ground, ultimately the goal is to tie our marketing activity back to revenue generation, right? And so that's the holy grail that we're looking for, is how many MQLs are actually leading to pipeline, how much of that pipeline is closing, where are we investing our marketing dollars, and in bringing people through that journey. But it's going to take some time to get to those actual hard KPIs. And so these are some of the leading indicators that I recommend, especially on the enterprise B2B side, you look at when we start talking about like building that brand awareness. Is your branded search traffic increasing over time, especially as you start building your PR program, placing more content? You can get a pulse for, is your brand growing in a little bit more authority as that traffic increases? Are you seeing more visitors to your site? Obviously, we all want to see those visitors take action. And so starting to, right, because there are ways to diagnose, hey, we're getting the traffic, but they're not doing anything, or they're leaving right away. All right, there's something to analyze there. We can kind of deep dive into that to refine, are we targeting the right people? Is the message maybe off and not resonating? So there's definitely things to click into with each of these leading indicator metrics to help to refine and tweak this over time and get to that holy grail of tying it back to revenue. But the one that I want to highlight the most here is also looking at that ICP that you developed and a target account list that maps to that ICP, and start seeing, are you engaging with those accounts? So maybe they haven't signed up for a demo request yet or a trial because they've only seen your brand and your message a couple of times, but there's interest there, and they've clicked on that email, or they've downloaded a piece of content. They're starting to engage, maybe on social. For example, on LinkedIn, you can go and see the accounts that are engaging with your LinkedIn ads. And so there are some things that you can start measuring to see, are you on the right track? Are you directionally going the right way? And that's ultimately going to lead to more of that down funnel activity of demo requests, trials, that then turn into pipeline and revenue. And so these are some of the KPIs that I would pay attention to, at least as your leading indicators, certainly not ignoring some of the ultimate KPIs around return on investment, but this is where you can start, and then we can work together on diagnosing potentially, if you feel like one of these numbers feels off and you're just not seeing the pull through that you expected. All right, so we are about wrapped, and we do have time as well for a little bit of Q&A or questions if you have any. And we addressed a couple on that previous slide. So feel free to send any questions through the Q&A as we wrap up here. But Ranjit, do you want to wrap us up with some of the key takeaways from today's session?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've thrown a lot of content at you over the last 40 plus minutes. So, here's 3 key takeaways from what we've covered today. That virtuous cycle is so important. So if we hire demand gen before we take care of our ideal customer persona, our ideal customer profile and our persona, the demand gen person or folks will spend a lot of time doing that foundational stuff. So do that first. Mm-hmm. Understand who you're targeting, how you're improving their life, what they care about. Why should they trust you? What are your proof points? All those sorts of things. So that's kind of first and foremost, because it's all under your control. This is not it'll require time, and it's a lot harder than we think it's going to be. I've gone through it many, many times, and it's like, oh, I know who I'm selling to. It's harder than you think it's going to be, and invest the time in it, because it'll give you so much better leverage on the things you actually spend hard dollars on later. So that's the first one. The second one kind of just unpacks that a little bit, which is you should really know who you're talking to. So understand what their life looks like with and without you, and with and without your competitors. So what is it that keeps them up at night? Where do they see themselves going in 5 years? What are their career ambitions? How can you help them solve bigger problems that give them wins in their organization, that help them get promoted, help them get to where they want to go? So really, and this should come through in the content that you create and the blogs that you write, even the way your sales pitch decks work and your demos work. It should really be speaking to that person, saying, "Oh, if Jeff at Acme Bank heard this, it would resonate with Jeff." And that's really how well you should know this persona that you create. And then the last thing is, again, staying in the vein of doing what you control, that blogging, whether it's on your own blog or LinkedIn articles or even things like Medium, but this is a way for you to crystallize your own thoughts. Here's the problem I'm solving. Here's why my approach is different. Here's how this could revolutionize the things that matter to my persona. Here's a new way of solving this problem. And ideally, I'm personally a big proponent on writing it on one's own blog and then syndicating it out, right? Do a digest version of it for LinkedIn, or a month later, repost it on Medium or whatever, with appropriate backlinks so you don't get dinged by Google and Bing. But that really starts building your SEO juice, your credibility with the search engines. But it's also a great way to test your message. You can see what's resonating. You can see, hey, both these blogs were identical, but I got a lot more visits and a lot more engagement out of this one than this one. And that should spark what's going on with your messaging. So those are the three most critical takeaways from all that stuff that we've covered over the past 45 minutes.
Great. Thank you. And I think with that, we're about ready to wrap up here. And I don't see any new questions right now in the chat. We have one more minute or so if you want to send anything through, but I did want to end with an opportunity to reach out to me or Ranjit afterwards. Send us an email anytime, connect with us on LinkedIn. We would love to talk to you, even just to get acquainted with you, but also if there's anything that we talked about today that you'd like to deep dive into, we're happy to do that as well, and just sit with you on a working session to unpack your specific where you're at in your business today, where you're at in your go-to-market program. And I just saw we do have a couple other questions coming through, so I want to make sure that we answer this one. So I see from Jeff here, he's asking, how reliable are Facebook and LinkedIn ads? And I'll give a first answer here, and I would love to hear, Ranjit, if you've got some other thoughts on this as well. I think it's as reliable as your ability to target effectively. And so certainly, and in fact, I think on the B2B side, sometimes Facebook is discounted because, it's a consumer platform. It's, jokes about boomers abound and such. But it actually can be a very effective first retargeting. That's what I would typically recommend as a starting place for LinkedIn and Facebook ads, is you can drop that, not to get too technical, but you can drop that pixel from each of those ad platforms onto your site and start retargeting the visitors who are coming through your other promotional channels. So maybe you're, sending some emails out, you're getting some folks who are going and clicking through, maybe they haven't taken action yet. You can, in a lower cost way, at least start retargeting to start warming accounts that have expressed some interest in the past. And so that's usually my starting place. And then my second would be, I would say on Facebook, it is harder to target effectively, but there are supplemental MarTech platforms. Again, at this stage, I don't recommend investing too heavily in your tech stack until you have a better idea of who your ICP is, and what's working for you in terms of messaging and offers. But there are some solutions out there for more effective targeting on Facebook, but especially on LinkedIn, you can get really tight on which companies you're reaching out to, which individuals you're reaching out to. You can even upload, a list of individual contacts and target kind of those people, or you can do a company list with titles. And so it can be quite effective, but you have to really make the platforms work for you and then understand what the weaknesses are as well. And so starting with that retargeting is where I go. Anything else you'd add to that, Ranjit?
No, I think you absolutely covered everything. LinkedIn is great to give you precision targeting. People tend to lie less on LinkedIn, so that your targeting can be a little bit more
That's right.
authentic. And then Facebook is great for retargeting, because the perception I've gotten, especially on the B2B side, is if a person starts seeing ads from you and they haven't engaged on your site, you might have a WTF moment because they see that as a personal space. But if they've been on your site and you're retargeting, they're much more forgiving. And in fact, that might bring you back up top of mind. But yeah, just really just echoing what you said, Renee, it was spot on.
Right. And it's the brand impression too, right? So even if they're scrolling through Facebook, doing their doom scrolling mindlessly, there is value in that brand impression that then maybe when they're, they get that email from you the next day, that's what they click on, but that you're still reinforcing your message, you're reinforcing that you exist and your value to them. And that tends to be a little bit lower cost as well to do retargeting on Facebook than potentially on LinkedIn or some other channels. Great. I don't think we have any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And thank you all for joining today. If you have anything else, feel free to email us, and we will be sending out the recording and slides from this event to you all today, along with some of the other resources that we referenced. Really appreciate you joining us today. Thanks,
Awesome.
Ranjit.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Renee.
Thanks.